Well, is it safe to buy a home as is in Hawaii? If you're a buyer, that might be some fear, like you don't know what you're getting into. Likewise, if you're a homeowner and you want to sell as is and be done with the deal and you don't want a buyer to even look at your house, these are two misconceptions that we're going to talk about today. My name is David Buck. I'm a full-time real estate broker here in Honolulu, Hawaii. Been licensed since 2001. And I want to say, just to clear the air here, probably over the last 15 to 20 years, 90% or more of the transactions I've done on the island were homes that were sold as is. So today we're going to get into selling a home or condo as is here in Hawaii. And this is going to be a common form that you're going to see. It's an as is addendum. And I don't want that to freak people out. So, first off, we're going to cover the buyer side of things, and then we're going to cover the seller side of things. And being a real estate broker, we represent both buyers and sellers. So, first off, from a buyer standpoint, if you're going into a deal and say if you're a first time home buyer, not comfortable with signing something that says you're buying it as is, well, I always say this is like a gesture up front that you're gonna not gonna nickel and dime the seller if you discover something during the home inspection period that you can't live with. Like, for instance, paint, cosmetic things, that sort of thing. But what an as-is addendum doesn't do, it doesn't remove your right to home inspection. So we have a paragraph in the standard Hawaii Association of Realtors purchase contract that's paragraph J1. And I never recommend waiving that when I'm representing a buyer because you want to be able to do your due diligence when buying a home. And during that J1 period, that's when you have your discovery. And I recommend hiring a professional home inspector. And then if they're going to recommend other professional vendors, whether it be roofers, electricians, plumbers, etc., to have those vendors come in. So you ultimately, at the end of the day, feel comfortable purchasing your property. Like I said, whether it be a home or a condo. Now, with that said, you're kind of upfront saying that, okay, I'm not going to nickel and dime the seller. But heaven forbid, when you put, say, if I go and show you a house or show you a condo, most everyday home buyers are not professional electricians, plumbers, etc. That's why we hire the professionals. So, with that said, if there's something that's out of the ordinary, I like to say, and I think there's a lot of other realtors out there that, we although we represent a buyer or seller on either side of the deal, like I said, I have represented both sides, not necessarily in the same transaction, but I think it's safe to say that if a buyer finds something that's a safety issue, like major with electrical or plumbing or roofing, because they're not a professional and just initially seeing the house, that might not stand out to them. So when that's brought to their attention, that is, I think, a reasonable request to put in front of a seller to say, hey, look, we weren't aware of this ahead of time. We're looking for some compensation here, especially if there's something having to do with safety, electrical being a big one. And on both sides of the deal, that's where I have seen concessions or sellers willing to make the deal work if it's something having to do with safety. So keep that in mind. And then, when I am representing a seller, I normally, even though I don't represent the buyer, I think it's always good in good faith to have a seller, work with that buyer because if they say, hell no, get out of here, let's cancel the deal, then they're going to come across the next buyer that's going to ultimately have to be disclosed to them that there's an electrical issue, plumbing issue, something that's major that the buyer was not aware of ahead of time. But like anything in real estate, everything is negotiable. But I have seen deals like this home in the backdrop behind me. I represent a bank in selling this home, which was truly as is. It was not safe to even walk in. That's one extreme of the spectrum. But like I'm saying, 90% or more of the deals I've done over the last 15 to 20 years have been as is. And sometimes we're talking new construction homes, new construction condos. There's high-end brokers that I'm friends with that sell nothing less than millions of dollars on their listings. And on every deal that they sell, when they represent a seller, they're saying they're selling it as is. And like I said, most of the deals out there are going to take place here in Hawaii, are going to be sold as is. But I don't want that to scare you because at the end of the day, you do have that J1 home inspection period to protect yourself as a buyer. And then likewise, as a seller, I think selling a home as is advantageous because you're upfront telling, Mr. and Mrs. Home Buyer, I'm not gonna, there's a nick in the carpet here, there's, ding in the wall, like those things are pretty visible. And I'm just want to sell this home and be done with it. So, but if something jumps out, because most homeowners, just like buyers, they're not everyday contractors. So they might not be aware of something going on with their property. I sold one recently here in Honolulu that I won't get into too many specifics here, but my clients lived in the home for 50 years. There was something going on in the house that they had no idea with, and so being a reasonable seller, they worked with that buyer and we got that deal done. So if you have any questions about buying or selling a home or condo as is in Hawaii, or just want to talk about real estate in general, my number is 808-371-3509. Mahalo and have a great day.